O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which, in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. Please be seated. Orders of the day, private members' business. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Make which, Madam Speaker. Good morning. I am announcing the second reading of Bill 301 until 10:30 a.m. this morning or sooner, followed by the second reading of Bill 202 for the remainder of the morning until 11 a.m.
It has been announced that the House will consider second reading of Bill 301, the Winnipeg Humane Society Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act, until 10:30 or sooner this morning, and that will be followed by Bill 202, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Personal Care Home Staffing Guidelines. So I will start then by calling second reading of Bill 301, the Winnipeg Humane Society Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Which, Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the member for Thompson, that Bill 301, the Winnipeg Humane Society Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for St. John's, seconded by the Honourable Member for Thompson, that Bill 301, the Winnipeg Humane Society Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Which, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to stand up this morning and put a couple of words on the record for Bill 301, the Winnipeg Humane Society Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act. Madam Speaker, the current act was established in 1990, and certainly, Madam Speaker, I think we could all agree that a lot of things change over 30 years. The Winnipeg Humane Society's Foundation Board has asked me to bring forward these changes to help ensure a sustainable long-term future for the organization that many of us, if not all of us, have come to cherish. Madam Speaker, the Winnipeg Humane Society has been established for many years and has been working tirelessly to protect animals from suffering and to rehome animals and promote the welfare and dignity of animals. I know that in the last many years that I've been elected, I've been very proud to put on the record that I am the proud mummy of Chili Dog. Chili Dog actually comes from the Winnipeg Humane Society. My son and I had been looking for a dog for about a year, and it was very serendipitous the way that Chili Dog came to be. But we were actually just about to leave the Winnipeg Humane Society this one Sunday afternoon. And as we were making our way out the door, one of the Winnipeg Humane Society people that work there, folks, I can't remember if she was a volunteer or she's a staff, was coming with Chili Dog. He was about 8 weeks old, and he had been at a birthday party. And so we kind of saw him and said hello and fell in love, and he was meant to be a Fontaine. And so we brought him home literally an hour later. And so the Winnipeg Humane Society has a very special place in my heart, not only because of Chili Dog, but they do phenomenal work. As most people in Manitoba know, I am an avid dog lover, but also an avid animal rights advocate. And we know that in Manitoba we have very serious issue in the overpopulation of dogs in Manitoba, particularly in northern and rural communities. And I think that it is important to support the organizations that are doing that work, including the Winnipeg Humane Society. And so this bill, Madam Speaker, will specifically just amend the composition of the Foundation's board to reflect practices that allow people who are willing and eager to participate to do so. With the changing markets, the Foundation will also no longer be required to use trust companies to invest. Instead, the Foundation must establish its own investment policy and may retain external investment managers to invest the Foundation's assets. This will change the way the Foundation is investing its assets in a way that ensures their long-term financial stability. I know that all of us on this side of the House are very much willing to support this bill and willing this morning for it to go to committee and then obviously concurrence and third reading. We support the Winnipeg Humane Society, and on behalf of the NDP caucus, we say miigwech to them for their very, very valued and important work. Miigwech.
A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the sponsoring member by any member in the following sequence. First question to be asked by a member from another party. This is to be followed by a rotation between the parties. Each independent member may ask one question, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. Are there any questions? The Honourable Member for Transcona, Radisson. The Honourable Member for Radisson, was there a question?
Sorry, I believe the member for the member for Selkirk was ahead of me.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Radisson. Go ahead and ask your question.
Very good. That's fine. Then can the member for St. John's explain what process they went with in terms of consulting with others about this legislation and the changes that are being proposed by the Humane Society? Was it simply the board's request, or were there additional consultations that were made by this member? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member knows, this is a public bill, and so I was approached by the Winnipeg Humane Society to support this bill. I trust the Winnipeg Humane Society that they did the work necessary that they needed to ensure the viability of their organization for years to come. Miigwech.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Could the member for St. John's please tell us how many pets does the Winnipeg Humane Society help find homes for on an average each year?
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. The Winnipeg Humane Society does, and I know I cannot say enough, the good work that they do on behalf of animals in Manitoba. And that actually translates to about 4,200 animals per year that they rescue, that they take care of, and that ultimately they rehome.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member from St. John states that the Winnipeg Humane Society currently invests through trust funds. What specifically are the problems with trust fund investments that would necessitate a change to investment management? Do the trust funds underperform? Were there wrongdoings noted? What exactly are the reasons for the proposed change?
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Well, Madam Speaker, it's not my responsibility to go into the financial management of the Winnipeg Humane Society. They have a foundation that does very good work, and they have people that are on the foundation that have the expertise and that have the foundation's best interest at heart alongside the animals that they rescue each and every year. I think it's important to recognize, again, and I'll put this on the record, that this is a public bill. And this was brought forward from the Winnipeg Humane Society, and I trust in their foundation and all of the leadership that they did the necessary work for Bill 301.
Are there any further questions? I would ask members that are participating remotely that it is helpful if you would let the moderator know if you have any questions. That makes it much easier for us to proceed with this. The Honourable Member for Southdale. The Honourable Member for Southdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the member for St. John's explain why these changes are necessary?
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I noted in the couple of words that I put on the record, the Act was established over 30 years ago. And certainly I think that nobody in the chamber would disabuse the Winnipeg Humane Society in respect of their expertise that they needed changes that kept up with the times. It's as simple as that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the member for St. John's please explain why she was willing to support this very important bill?
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I love animals, and anybody that knows that since I became an MLA, I have tried my best in this position of privilege to support rescues and shelters and those advocates that are on the front line, not only the Winnipeg Humane Society, but the Winnipeg Animal Services, Save a Dog Network. It goes on and on. In fact, just this past weekend, I took one of the two dogs that was attacked with a machete into my home. There was blood everywhere because his wound is a little bit open, but he was a sweetie, and I will continue to do that. I absolutely love animals, and I will continue to support organizations that do that work on behalf of animals.
The Honourable Member for Radisson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for St. John's for her concern and her that she's also demonstrating by her actions. I very much appreciate that. I think it's important to give good consideration to animal welfare. I guess my question is where we may disagree is I think it's important for a legislator to understand the legislation that they're bringing forward. I think of what we've seen with the We Charity Board and nationally, how what might have seemed to be a good charity wasn't necessarily operating very well. And so I would ask again if the member can take steps is she willing to take steps to further understand this legislation and explain it to us?
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Well, Madam Speaker, it's unfortunate that the member for Radisson doesn't like animals and doesn't like organizations that do good work on behalf of animals. Madam Speaker, we know that the Winnipeg Humane Society has the expertise to ensure that they have the stability well into the future to continue to do the work that they need to do on behalf of animals. I actually would encourage the member for Radisson to reach out to the Winnipeg Humane Society. I'm sure that they're willing to do a tour when it is safe to do so that he can also meet the good folks at the Winnipeg Humane Society that do this work.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As somebody who was who grew up, didn't have any pets, I actually didn't know a whole lot about the animals that the Humane Society rescues, and so I'm wondering if the member for St. John's could provide a little bit of clarity around the kinds of animals that the Humane Society does rescue. As somebody who is learning more about the work that they do, I'd appreciate learning more about the animals that they provide care for.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, over the many, many years that I've been going to the Winnipeg Humane Society, going to buy food at their store or going to look for a new pet, as we did with Chili Dog, we have seen that the Winnipeg Humane Society rescues dogs, cats, I've seen a bird there. I've seen rabbits there. One time I believe that there was maybe a pig. So they do a lot of good work, and not only do they bring animals into the Winnipeg Humane shelter, they actually do a lot of advocating, particularly in respect of this government's gag bill. And so they're organizing around that as well. So in the best interest of farm animals as well.
The honourable member for Radisson.
I'm very sorry, I was muted.
The honourable member for Radisson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much. And certainly, I am very, very much appreciative of the work of the Winnipeg Humane Society, and very much interested in animal welfare, as is the other members. So, my question, in the spirit of goodwill and the spirit of camaraderie that we should be enjoying in this House, I would ask if the member could take some time to tell us more about her dog, Chili Dog, and tell us maybe the favorite memory that Chili Dog Fontaine has had with the rest of the family, and maybe also just tell us about the size.
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for St. John's.
Well, Madam Speaker, I think that's his best question since 2016. So let me just say, Chili Dog is the sweetest puppy. And when I got him, he was 8 weeks old. I thought he'd be like maybe medium, like height or anything like that. He's actually way taller. He comes up to here. I've never had a dog in my life. So it's been a journey. He once, for the purposes of this room, he actually once broke my nose by accident because I was trying to cuddle him and he didn't like that. And so I walked around, including in the building, with a little bit of a black eye. So I say miigwech to the member for Radisson for that great question.
Oh, the honourable member, or the honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have had the opportunity to tour the Winnipeg Humane Society, and recently after our dog passed away, we were looking at their site and looking to potentially adopt a dog from there. I know they have very few dogs that seemed available now, and I understand part of that's because of COVID and the number of people who are adopting animals during COVID. Does the member, I know because she has a special connection with the Winnipeg Humane Society, could she talk a little bit about the challenges that COVID has caused for the Humane Society and what might happen on the other side of the pandemic as a result of people having adopted dogs but maybe not keeping them always?
The honourable member for St. John's.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. In fact, the minister is right. One of the things that shelters have found, including the Winnipeg Animal Services alongside the Humane Society, is that because of COVID, because more people were home, it was interestingly enough, a good opportunity to go out and adopt dogs because people are home. I think that's one of the considerations for adopting a dog, is that so many of us obviously work outside the home and are gone for hours at a time. And so, you know, I'm hesitant to say that there was a positive for COVID, but certainly in the lives of animals there was, in respect of the increase and exponential rate of adoptions of dogs. Miigwech.
The time for this question period has expired. Debate is open. The honourable member for Selkirk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to place a few words on the record regarding Bill 301, introduced to the House by the member from St. John's. Winnipeg Humane Society's Foundation Incorporation Amendment Act. The amendment seeks to change the foundation of the board and allow the foundation to no longer use trust companies to invest. Instead, the foundation must establish an investment policy and has the option of retaining external investment managers to invest the foundation's assets in accordance with that policy. As drafted, the amendment eliminates the requirement of the Humane Society to use the services of either a trust or an investment manager at the discretion of the board. One needs to question, why is this change needed? Madam Speaker, the Winnipeg Humane Society has much to celebrate and be proud of over the years since it was first established. I'm not sure many members would know that the organization was initially formed in 1894, some 126 years ago, and was initially known as a Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Women, Children, and Animals. In 1899, the Society hired its first agent. Armed with a streetcar pass and a basket for injured animals, the agent, Captain Smith, traveled 5 miles a day caring for abandoned and injured animals while promoting the humane treatment of animals. In 1909, a women's branch who worked on funding and education was formed. It wasn't until 1911 that the Winnipeg Humane Society focused solely on the welfare of animals, with the focus on the humane treatment of horses. The City of Winnipeg opened the first shelter for animals on Logan Avenue in 1929. The Logan Avenue shelter was purchased from the city in 1935. Operations were difficult until 1968, when the Winnipeg Humane Society built a new shelter at 5 Kent Street. The shelter remained in operation for 39 years until it was over capacity. Originally designed to house 2,500 animals a year, it was housing almost 10,000. Overcrowding, disease control, and quarantine procedures were taxed to the limits. There was inadequate space for the veterinary spay and neuter clinic and animal adoption area. Educational programs had to be run out of a trailer in the parking lot. To respond, the Winnipeg Humane Society purchased an 8-acre lot for the development of a new facility. On October 25th, 2007, after 8 years of planning and fundraising, the new 40,000 square foot facility located at 45 Hearst Way opened. Madam Speaker, today the Winnipeg Humane Society is known as one of the most successful and proactive adoption centers in Canada, and is responsible for finding homes for more than 4,200 animals and reuniting more than 700 dogs and cats with their owners each year. Around 6,000 spays and neuter surgeries are performed annually, and the organization continues to remain on the forefront of animal welfare issues concerning the city, province, and country. Madam Speaker, my background is in animal husbandry, veterinary medicine, and business management. I have always been involved in animal welfare and care. In 1985, I was approached by the Department of Agriculture's Chief Veterinary Officer to see if I would be interested in conducting humane inspections on behalf of the province throughout Manitoba on an as-needed basis. At that time, inspections consisted of a very simplistic one-page form made in triplicate, one copy for the owner, one for the department, and one for the inspector. As the years progressed, animal protection officers became peace officers under the Department of Agriculture. I was one of the first animal protection officers appointed in the province with badge number 2. I never knew who had the number 1 badge. Over the years, I saw some very disturbing cases. The case of a 9-month-old Rottweiler that we had seized because it had a very deep infected wound on its neck was brought up by my son the other day. The dog had a wound which encircled the entire neck. The wound was so badly infected and needed immediate surgical attention. It was soon evident when the dog was in surgery, the cause of the wound was a metal choke collar that was placed in the dog when it was much younger. As the dog grew, the owner said he thought the dog had lost the collar. It had actually cut through the skin to the point where it was no longer visible. Madam Speaker, I could go on and on with stories like this, where the welfare and humane treatment of animals was clearly at issue. In almost every case, the owners did not acknowledge intent. Much of my job involved education, focusing on recommendations and follow-up. Many do not understand today that it is just as inhumane to have a malnourished pet as it is to have an obese animal. Both will have serious health problems that will cause future problems, suffering, and premature death. Madam Speaker, Bill 301 proposes an amendment to allow the Winnipeg Humane Society to switch from an investment trust to being able to elect to use the expertise of an investment management company or individual. It is important to understand the member has failed to explain the reasons for this request. Under the current system, a trust company is a legal entity that acts as a fiduciary, an agent, or trustee on behalf of a person or business for a trust. A trust company is typically tasked with the administration, management, and the eventual transfer of assets to beneficiaries, in this case, the Winnipeg Humane Society. Trusts are managed for profit. The trust company does not own the assets its customers assign to its management. It may assume legal obligation to take care of the assets on behalf of its clients. Wealth management services are one of the most common uses for a trust company, which includes investment management and wealth preservation so that a client's future operations have the funds when needed. Trust companies can also build financial plans for their clients for additional fees depending on the level of service needed. There are many trust companies to choose from, ranging in size and fees. The larger trust companies provide more products and services, but may lack the personal touch of smaller institutions. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, the member opposite has not provided any specific concern for discussion to allow for our due diligence as legislators to make an informed decision. The information as to why they wish to move away from a trust company for the management of their funds is noticeably absent. Are there underlying poor performance concerns, or are there mismanagement concerns or wrongdoing concerns that would support the proposed amendments? Madam Speaker, the Winnipeg Humane Society is the largest animal welfare organization in the province and provides many services to the province, from adoptions to animal advocacy campaigns. The Winnipeg Humane Society is known to take in over 8,000 animals per year, including stray cats and dogs, owner-surrendered pets, unsuccessful adoptions from other shelters or rescues, lost pets, injured animals rescued by the Winnipeg Humane Society, emergency seizures by the Winnipeg Animal Protection Officers, animal rescued by emergency drivers, and injured wildlife. The Winnipeg Humane Society has spearheaded many innovative programs in Manitoba, providing an affordable spay and neuter option to all Manitobans, which is part of its plan. The Winnipeg Humane Society's subsidized spay and neuter assistance program provides low-income families the opportunity to get their cat spayed or neutered for a discounted rate. This program is part of their ongoing efforts to reduce the number of unwanted and homeless pets in Manitoba. The Winnipeg Humane Society provides specialized training and behavior programs for dogs, at-risk youth programs, and education programs. The Experienced Dog Adoption Program matches dogs with specific issues with the appropriate owner in order to give them the best chances at success. The Winnipeg Humane Society also supports voluntary, affordable, accessible spay-neuter programs for
Order, please. When this matter is again before the House, the honourable member will have 1 minute remaining. And as previously announced, the House will now consider second reading of Bill number 202, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Personal Care Home Staffing Guidelines. The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for St. John's, that Bill number 202, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Personal Care Home Staffing Guidelines, be now read a second time and referred to a committee of this House.
It has been moved by the honourable member for Union Station, seconded by the honourable member for St. John's, that Bill number 202, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Personal Care Home Staffing Guidelines, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House. The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, currently, under the provincial guidelines for personal care homes, each resident should receive 3.6 paid hours of care per day. Depending on the number of residents, that would mean that up to 35% of the care would have to be provided by nursing professionals. The interesting thing, though, Madam Speaker, about those direct patient care hours, paid patient care hours, is that those paid hours don't actually entirely need to reflect the direct care that's provided to patients. And so what you'll see happening is long-term care residents may be receiving much less than that if their nursing care providers, for example, are having a professional development day, or doing other duties, paid duties, and not actually providing direct care. And Madam Speaker, I think the other thing that's really important for folks to know is that 3.6, not only is that an inadequate amount of time, but it's really it's less than the bare minimum. And so what this bill is proposing, and this isn't the first time this bill has been introduced, but what this bill is proposing is that folks in long-term care homes, residents in PCHs would receive at least 4 hours of direct patient care per day. And I say that because that, to be completely clear, should kind of be the baseline, the bottom, rather. That's not the ceiling, that's not the way we cap it, Madam Speaker, but we're saying that, at least 4 hours of direct patient care per day would see folks living in long-term care have improved health outcomes. Research supports that. Research shows that the more direct patient care hours someone receives in long-term care, the better their outcomes are, the better their mental health is, the better they do overall in those settings. This bill would also see that by the end of 2021-2022 fiscal year, the minister would be able to report on the reasons for failing to achieve this target and how the actual care was given adequately provides for the health, safety, and comfort for residents. This is really, really important in terms of reporting and in terms of being able to strategically plan around how care is provided to our elders, to our loved ones in long-term care. It's one thing to say that we should be providing for 4 hours of direct patient care, but it's another thing to say that we should be measuring and reporting on that. And ultimately, we can't fix what we don't measure, Madam Speaker. And so that reporting aspect is really, really important. And I think that now we're in a time where we are seeing, not only in Manitoba, but certainly across other jurisdictions, the impacts of inadequate care on our older adults, on our loved ones and elders in long-term care. There is a heightened awareness and a new attention to what direct patient care, what reporting, what transparency in these ways means for our loved ones in long-term care. This pandemic has devastated long-term care homes in jurisdictions across Canada. We're seeing the impacts of this pandemic in long-term care homes here now in Manitoba in a way we didn't see months ago. And, we have an opportunity right now, Madam Speaker, to make choices as legislators that not only improve the health care and the outcomes for our loved ones in long-term care right now, but can do so well into the future. And this bill will assist in being able to do that. Over the past several weeks, I've had conversations almost on a daily basis with family members of those who are residing in long-term care homes. This week alone, I spoke with 2 people that I know personally, 2 people who were really important adults in my life when I was a young person playing basketball, when I was a university student. And those folks unfortunately shared the news with me this week that their parents had died in long-term care as a result of COVID-19. And those are really hard conversations, Madam Speaker. And we had lengthy conversations about the care that their loved ones received. And I want to make this point very clear, that we know that our healthcare workers are working as hard as they can to provide the absolute best care possible before this pandemic and during this pandemic. And I say this as someone who has worked in long-term care. I know how heavy that workload can be and is. It's really not a reflection of how hard healthcare workers are working, but it's a reflection of the importance of providing adequate resource for people to be able to provide care in the ways that best serve residents and those living in long-term care homes. And so when I spoke with these folks about what was going on in long-term care, they also expressed a desire to see a bill like this passed, a desire to see everyone's loved ones in long-term care homes receive the care they deserve. And the only way that you can ensure that is to increase the care that someone receives, to legislate it, quite frankly. And then you put that responsibility on the folks who have the power and the capacity to deliver those resources that will allow for that care to be provided. And so I would urge, all members of this House to reflect not only on what we can do right now during this pandemic, but reflect on our responsibility to contribute to real systemic change within our healthcare system, to do better by our elders, to do better by older adults. The way that our loved ones in long-term care have been treated during this pandemic, and I will specifically identify the Minister of Health's comments recently saying the deaths in long-term care homes were unavoidable. Madam Speaker, we know that that's false. We know that that's wrong. We know that that's not true. Experts across the board have identified that. But I really want people to reflect on the impact of what a statement like that has on those living in long-term care, on folks who are vulnerable, many folks who are unable to protect themselves in situations of crisis, in a pandemic, who are dependent, reliant, and trusting us to ensure that they receive the best care possible. It is reprehensible that a statement like that would be made. And it would be reprehensible that now, given what is before us, what we're seeing, what has been amplified in terms of the responsibilities upon us to protect vulnerable people, to equip frontline workers with what they need to provide care in the best ways possible. It would be reprehensible for us to not do better and implement legislation such as this, and also reflect on how we can create meaningful, long-term, systemic change in our healthcare system for older adults, elders, and seniors in long-term care. And so I look forward to answering any questions in regards to this bill, the conversations around this. And I invite all members of this House that if you have questions or concerns beyond this conversation today, that you reach out to me. I'm happy to have those conversations. I'm happy to work with folks who want to make sure that our loved ones in long-term care receive the best care they deserve, the adequate care that they deserve, and that the folks providing that care are equipped with the resources to do so, Madam Speaker. And that's really the other aspect of this bill that's so important for us to recognize. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're providing the resources that are required for long-term care homes to deliver the outcomes that we know the folks that reside there are in need of.
And just a reminder for all members participating remotely that if you do have a question or you want to debate, please let the moderator know so that we can move through this in a efficient manner. A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held. Questions may be asked to the sponsoring member by any member in the following sequence. First question to be asked by a member from another party. This is to be followed by a rotation between the parties. Each independent member may ask one question, and no questions or answers shall exceed 45 seconds. The Honourable Member for La Vérendrye on a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the member from Union Station please inform the House who they've consulted about this legislation? And I mean like organizations or different associations. If the member would please provide us with that information.
Honourable Member for Union Station.
I thank the member for the question. Numerous organizations have been consulted in regards to this legislation. I think it's also really important to identify the fact that there's a lot of research that substantiates this legislation across varying jurisdictions in the country, certainly right here in Manitoba. There's large bodies of evidence that support this. Stats Canada has evidence and information that supports this that is years and years and years old, quite frankly. And I also want to make clear again that this 4 hours is not it's a standard. It's certainly being looked at in a lot of ways as the gold standard, but I would also argue that, we can do better, and that if we say, 5 hours is also able to be delivered, then deliver 5.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to ask the member for Union Station, because I know that they are speaking from a place of quite a bit of knowledge as a frontline healthcare provider, as a nurse, and with a lot of nursing background. So could the member explain to the rest of us without that expertise why they're putting emphasis, why the emphasis on direct care is so important?
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
I thank the member from Wolseley for the question. That emphasis on direct care is so important because it would ensure that it's not being confused with other paid hours within the workday, not professional development hours, not paid breaks. It would ensure that the direct patient care component is actually actioned and reported on. So we're talking about feeding folks in long-term care. We're talking about peri-care, for example. We're talking about, sitting down and engaging with folks. The time that is required to actually do things like assess after you've distributed medications, all of these things to properly assess and enhance the care that someone is receiving.
The Honourable Member for Riding Mountain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For 17 years, the NDP failed to improve the healthcare system in Manitoba. Can the member for Union Station please tell this House why we should listen to them now?
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
I would thank the member for that question. And I would say, the government has been in power now for several years. And there's an opportunity in front of all members of this House to make a decision that will impact the outcomes for our loved ones in long-term care today and into the future. And, members opposite can continue to blame other people, but the fact of the matter is they have made multiple cuts in just a couple of years, in the last 3 years, leading into this pandemic, that have unfortunately left long-term care homes terribly positioned to respond to this pandemic, and they failed them during this pandemic. So I would encourage the member to reflect on the decision-making of his own government right now, how they've compromised the ability of long-term care providers to support our loved ones in long-term care today.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank the member for Union Station for bringing forward this bill, which we certainly support. It's been very clear for many years. In fact, the Long-Term Continuing Care Association of Manitoba and the Manitoba Association of Residential Community Care have indicated that going back up to 15 years, there has been a shortage. But clearly, this is needed now. We need to get to a much better standard of care in Manitoba. I'd like to ask specifically a little more rationale for the 4 hours and whether paperwork is included in that 4 hours or not.
The Honourable Member for Union Station. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
I thank the member for that question. The 4 hours would certainly be, direct care provided to residents, rather. So that those hours would be inclusive of, and I say this as a nurse, the reality of it is there are all kinds of things that happen, and I think the speaker is well aware, of what nursing looks like when you're in the field. But there are all sorts of things that happen when you're providing care. All sorts of documentation that may arise. I think about even when you're distributing medications, and that would be handing that out directly to residents, the immediate documentation that follows. But the focus of this 4 hours is direct patient.
The Honourable Member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Wolseley. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the member for Union Station if they can describe what the potential repercussions are for the Minister of Health and for this government if they fail to deliver 4 daily hours of direct care for all LTC residents.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you, the member for Wolseley, for that question. The potential repercussions would be, a decline in actually, I'm just going to be really direct about this. It would be a reflection of this government's failure, ongoing shortcomings in terms of providing the resources required for long-term care residents to have the best potential health outcomes. This is an opportunity for all of us, certainly for this government, to ensure good health outcomes for residents in long-term care. And so by not passing this piece of legislation, the government would be sending a clear message that they're not interested in long-term positive health outcomes for residents in long-term care.
Are there any further questions? The honourable member for Dauphin.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. In the 4 years, the PC government has made significant investments in health care to improve outcomes for everybody, including that in personal care. We've taken recent steps in terms of strict visitor restrictions and enhanced cleaning and those things. So I'm wondering, can the member opposite please inform this House if they are aware of the significant measures we have taken to protect seniors in Manitoba?
The honourable member for Union Station.
I thank the member for that question. I certainly hope that the member will be supporting this legislation. I know that at Dauphin's personal care home, there's about a 60% vacancy rate right now, and a piece of legislation like this would certainly help ensure that the residents in that personal care home would receive the care that they deserve, would receive the direct patient care that would enhance their health outcomes. And so I look forward to the members supporting this legislation to make sure that the cuts that this government has made that would have impacted long-term care homes like the one in Dauphin can be, the harm that was done as a result of that can be mitigated, and that we can work together to make sure that...
The honourable member's time has expired. The honourable member for Dawson Trail.
Can the member for Union Station please inform this House if they are aware that our $2 billion healthcare funding guarantee will increase the already record level of investments the BC government provides to healthcare, which was already $648 million more than the NDP ever spent?
The honourable member for Union Station.
Right off the cuff.
Order.
I thank the member for the question.
Order. The honourable member for Union Station.
I thank the member for the question. Myself, members of this House, certainly people in community are well aware that this government made multiple cuts to long-term care homes in this province leading up to this pandemic. And folks are very well aware of the fact that this government has failed to invest adequately in long-term care to prevent the deaths that are happening right now. 23 deaths of our loved ones in Parkview Place, 8 as of yesterday at Maple's personal care home. Let's focus on passing legislation that will literally help save lives, that will literally help folks in long-term care have better quality of life. Let's focus on mitigating the harms done by this government and pass a piece of legislation that's going to support our elders and loved ones in long-term care today.
The time for this question period has expired. Debate is open. The honourable member for La Vérendrye.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to rise in this House today and put some words on record for the bill brought forward by the member for Union Station. The Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Personal Care Home Staffing Guidelines. But before I get into my comments about Bill 202, I would like to thank the Speaker, the clerks, and all the staff for the hard work and hours they have contributed to make the legislature function virtually. I'm not a computer techie. I'm sure my grandson can figure things out faster than I can, but the change from in-person to virtual, from what I have seen, has gone over without any hiccups and has put this legislature into the 21st century. It will be interesting to see where this will take us and what we can do next. Madam Speaker, today personal care homes play an important role in helping our seniors as they get to the age where they need care and are not able to care for themselves. Physical issues, dementia, and other issues make it so they need to be in a home where they can be looked after and cared for with dignity. So their final years with us are ones that are comfortable and secure. Our seniors have given us a lot, and they deserve proper care. Many of us are a lot closer to making use of these facilities, so we must make sure we maintain proper standards for all our seniors. Until about 4 years ago, I had been in personal care homes, visiting different people, making visits as the MLA for the area, but never got to see the inner workings of a personal care home. But when my mother-in-law became a resident of one, that changed my perspective on them. I got to see firsthand the fantastic treatment she received from the staff, how the staff treated her like family and gave her the best care that anyone could ask for. We had a birthday party for her at the home to celebrate her 100th birthday. The staff sang happy birthday to her along with the family and had cake with her. We could not ask for better care than she was receiving. The staff was fantastic. Madam Speaker, it takes a special person to work at a personal care home. Some of the tasks they are called upon to do, there are many that would refuse to work there. The staff have patience and they care about the people they look after. The staff at all personal care homes need to be thanked and congratulated for everything they do to care for our loved ones. Madam Speaker, the other day, the Leader of the Opposition made a comment about filth in some of the personal care homes, the cockroaches, residents being allowed to be in soiled diapers. The way he made it sound, they were in these soiled diapers for what seemed like an eternity. Well, Madam Speaker, in the 3+ years that I visited my mother-in-law in a personal care home here in downtown Winnipeg, I did not see any of that. The workers I got to know would never let this happen to one of their residents. Madam Speaker, I think the Leader of the Opposition owes personal care home workers an apology for what he said. It is an insult to suggest that the workers are not looking after the residents. Madam Speaker, our government is committed to ensuring the health and well-being of seniors and their loved ones. Despite what the NDP members may say, our government has added personal care home beds to the system. Since April 2016, we've built 257 PCH beds, with another 253 in facilities at Steinbach and Carman currently under construction. And if any of the NDP members don't believe me, maybe they could come for a ride, and I would gladly show them what new PCH beds look like. Madam Speaker, that's 510 beds in total and a $156 billion investment in our first 2 years in government. We built almost twice as many PCH beds in Winnipeg as the NDP did from 2010 to 2016. The NDP did a lot of photo ops, a lot of promises, but that's as far as it went. No shovels in the ground, Madam Speaker. Absolutely no shovels. These investments support our PC government's commitments to increase the number of personal care home beds by 1,200 in Manitoba by 2025. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, we will. Mr. Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, our government announced $280 million in safety and capital upgrades at PCHs in Manitoba. These built on the government's commitment to ensure healthcare facilities are in line with revised Manitoba Fire Code requirements, including provisions of fire suppression system and increased fire separation, enhancements to better protect residents, staff, and the public. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government cares about the residents in personal care homes. That is why PCHs in Manitoba are routinely inspected. The department conducts standards review at all Manitoba PCHs at least once every 2 years. Our government has increased PCH inspections, and despite a pause caused by this COVID-19 pandemic, we have completed a record number of personal care home inspections this year. To date, inspectors have completed 115 reviews in 2020. Mr. Deputy Speaker, from 2010 to 2015, the NDP averaged 79.5 inspections per year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government will continue to take the necessary steps to protect our most vulnerable Manitobans. We have increased annual home care funding by over $50 million, or 16% more than the NDP ever did. Our $2 billion health care funding guarantees increased the record level of investment by our PC government to provide health care, which is already $648 million more than the last NDP budget. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I could go on all morning comparing our record with that of the NDP when they were in government. But we all know they were great at spending money, but were poor at achieving results. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our world, our country, and our community is in a pandemic. COVID-19 is making our lives difficult, especially for our seniors. Our government is committed to ensuring the health and well-being of our seniors during trying times. With the onset of COVID-19, we instituted steps to keep our seniors in personal care homes safe, including strict visitation.
Order. When this matter is before the House, the honourable member for Lagimoni will have 2 minutes remaining. Laval-Landry has 2 minutes remaining. So the honourable opposition House Leader on House Business.
Yeah, Miigwech, Deputy Speaker. Pursuant to Rule 33(8), I am announcing that the next private member's resolution to be considered on the next Thursday of private member's business will be one put forward by the honourable member for Fort Garry. The title of the resolution is Immediate and Comprehensive Supports Needed for Manitoba Small Businesses.
It has been brought to our attention from the honourable opposition House Leader that pursuant of Rule 33-8, I am announcing that the private member's resolution be considered for next Thursday of private member's business and will be put forward by the honourable member for Fort Garry. All in order? The honourable member for Fort Garry, yes. The title of the resolution is Immediate and Comprehensive Supports Needed for Manitoba Small Businesses. The time will be 11 o'clock, going on to resolution business. The honourable member for Transcona.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba urge the provincial government to immediately invest in
the honourable member order. The honourable member for Transcona, if you can first presented and then secondary by another member.
I move seconded.
I move and seconded by another member of your party.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy
The honourable member for
Speaker.
Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for Wolseley, the following. Can I speak to this now, Read the resolution.
Bring forward, yeah.
Okay.
Therefore be resolved.
Thank you. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba urge the provincial government to immediately invest in public schools to hire more teachers, more educational assistants, acquire new spaces for teaching and programming, provide more mental health supports for students and educators, and invest in remote learning supports, and use the money provided by the federal government to ensure all Manitoba students reserve and get the education they deserve.
I just want to clarify to correction that to make sure that when we the resolution be actually put forward as printed in the order papers for today. Is there leave to agree? To consider the resolution as in the order papers. Agreed and so ordered. It has been moved by the honourable member for Transco and a second by the honourable member for Wolseley. Therefore, to be resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba urge the provincial government to immediately invest in provincial public schools to hire more teachers, hire more education assistants, acquire new spaces for teaching and programming, provide more mental health support for students and educators, invest in remote learning supports, and use the money provided by the federal government to ensure that all Manitoban students receive the education they deserve. The honourable member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and for allowing me to put a few words on the record regarding this my private member's resolution. The Pallister government has set up schools to fail going into this pandemic with very little planning and very little signal as to the direction they wanted to go to. Year after year, we have seen cuts to education that have left us grossly under-resourced. We know that small class sizes are conducive to both a better learning environment and a reduced spread of COVID-19. If this government had invested in keeping class sizes small, our schools would have been able to provide the 2 meters consistently throughout the province, as Dr. Roussin has steadfastly maintained as a very effective way to reduce the spread of COVID in our schools. And this government has outright ignored calls from teachers, students, support staff, EAs, parents, other community groups to ensure that class sizes remain small so that students can safely and properly distance themselves in their learning spaces. This government did not provide any leadership to schools, leaving teachers, school divisions, everybody that works in the thing, trying to scramble to see what direction they were going to go. Because we have some new realities now when it comes to COVID-19 and the public health orders that have to be instituted in our buildings. They also did not provide any new support so that schools and school divisions could prepare, acquire new classroom space, see about community space, even looking at the teaching and learning supplies that have now become different with the realities of COVID. The Pallister government received $85 million from the federal government to invest in schools, but has spent none of it, and leaving our schools less prepared, even though we have these funds available. Also, out of the $100 million of provincial money that they've said they put in, only $17 million has so far been sent to our school divisions, right? And because these pieces are now missing, what ends up happening is that schools are feeling unsupported. Instead, what they see is a government preoccupied with the bottom line, which results in teacher stress, many on the brink of burnout, and parents that are worried about their kids' well-being in their own neighborhood schools. The Premier and the Minister have also refused calls to hire more teachers, support staff, EAs, so that students can receive one-on-one attention, address the significant learning loss that has occurred since March, and also all of the significant demands that are now put on schools and the kids so that they can be compliant with COVID-19. Instead, what ends up happening is that we've had a Premier layoff nearly 8,000 educational staff during the pandemic. So now what we have is the true costs of these cuts coming to the table. So as an example, the Premier has interfered in ongoing negotiations of school divisions, which precipitated a strike affecting transportation for many students and families. Teachers, EAs, staff in schools are doing the best they can right now, but they can't do this alone. They need a partner in government. A partner in government that is vocal, that is out there on the front lines with our staff, with everybody that works in the system, saying that we've got your back. But now, in the middle of a pandemic, we have more stress being created because of the K-12 education review without the public release of this report. Not only are they not releasing this report, they're introducing legislation and interfering in the democratic process by not distributing the bill that has cuts and changes to our educational system. And we urge the provincial government to immediately invest in provincial public schools to get more teachers, more EAs, and right to the front line. And that means also acquiring some extra space so that we can provide the proper teaching and programming and the mental health supports for students and educators. And this can be, of course, supported by some of that federal money that has been put to the table. Now, the Palliser government lately has also removed the cap on the K-3 class sizes that used to be 20 students. And this has been a major contributor to the inability to physically distance in our schools. As we know, every parent wants their child to have more one-on-one time with their teacher or with the adults that are in their classroom. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important it is to have appropriate teacher to student ratios, not only for health and safety, but for, of course, our number one piece, which is the teaching and learning process. Multiple research studies have shown that small class sizes allow this to happen so that we can get some of that important face-to-face time that is necessary in an effective classroom. Let's go back to the 2016 election. This government said that the Progressive Conservative Party believes that small class sizes are one factor in improving educational opportunities and outcomes for young children. There are 6,300 more children in Manitoba schools since the 2015-16 school year. Yet they cut the cap of 20 students in K-3 classes right away in 2017. That sent a clear signal. And since the removal of this cap, classroom size, the poll conducted by Viewpoints Research, teachers and students are feeling the effects of these cuts. 84% of teachers agreed that the removal of the cap has had a negative effect and ability to provide individualized attention to students and to even communicate effectively with parents. And now, in a public health crisis where top medical doctors are calling for physical distancing in classrooms, the Palliser government has made it impossible because of a lack of investment in schools and a failure to hire more teachers and find more space. The Premier is only focused on the bottom line. He has pushed education funding below inflation despite a growing population, which transfers into a de facto cut to education. And then he failed to commit to provide funding to hire more teachers, keep classroom sizes small, so that we can remain safe during a pandemic. Then after pressure, right, that we kept mounting from the public and from the opposition benches, they misled Manitobans into thinking that they were investing $100 million into schools, where nearly half of that savings was from them laying off thousands of school staff in the spring. And if the return to school wasn't stressful enough, the PC government is making schools jump through hoops just to apply for the money they say that's on the table. Palliser government is playing a dangerous game of underfunding the COVID-19 response and refusing to commit to using federal funds to keep our class sizes small, hire more teachers, and get the necessary teaching and learning supplies into our classroom. The Premier has no evidence to support his decisions. His so-called review of small class sizes didn't allow time to measure any of it. The Palliser government's funding freeze means more crowded classrooms, which we know will have devastating consequences on the quality of education. And the Palliser government is only just getting started. And just like in healthcare, their education review will mean more cuts to our kids' classrooms. We believe in putting the educational needs, health, and safety of our children first, ahead of these budget cuts. That is why we are committed on calling on the government to reinstate the cap on K-3 class sizes of 20, and including right now, because of the pandemic, an actual 15 student cap for all grades, so that we can maintain what Manitoba Health has outlined to ensure safety throughout the province. The Premier's College and Healthcare Review, we're also using this as an excuse to make cuts, and we'll do the same to K-12 education. We believe that investments in quality education from early years to adulthood is critical to ensure the success of Manitoba children and meet the growing needs of a skilled workforce for today and years to come. Just like in healthcare, though, the Palliser government's review of schools will lead to more cuts, more stress for teachers, larger class sizes, less one-on-one time, and fewer EAs in the classrooms to help our kids succeed. Manitoba MGEU President Michelle Goronsky says that every review that this government has undertaken is looking right now has led to cuts in services to Manitoba, and they have already cut classroom size. The minister, who was used to be the health minister, has recruited the previous ed minister for $750,000 to finish the job he started. That was Clayton Manis, and I remember those times in the 90s. So right now, what we're doing is we're calling on the government to reinstate funding and get that money into the classrooms now.
The honourable member's time is up.
Deputy Speaker, for having and put these.
The honourable member's time is up. A time for question period for up to 10 minutes will be held. A question may be addressed by the following sequence. The first question may be asked by a member from another party. Any subsequent questions must follow a rotation between parties. Each independent member may ask one question. No questions or answers shall exceed 45 seconds. The first question goes to the honourable member for Lac-du-Bonny.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It gives me great pleasure today to be able to participate in today's resolution brought forward by the member from Transcona. So I'm asking the member from Transcona. I know that he was an administrator for quite some time and a teacher. So basically, I'm just going to ask you a straightforward question, sir. Did you actually write this resolution yourself?
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member for Lac-du-Bonny for the question. This is my first time addressing him in this forum, and I'd like to continue by saying that in answering his question, I had a great role in writing this resolution. It's because of my experience in the classroom and in running schools. A lot of these pieces that you'll find in this resolution are things that I had a direct experience with, right? We know that the teaching and learning process has been greatly affected by the pandemic. And we know that as when we're trying to budget in our schools to make sure that we have what we need to get these changes in place, that we require these kind of resolutions to make that.
The honourable member's time is up.
Classrooms.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm certain that everyone who's sitting in this House has heard from teachers what a disaster is happening in schools right now. So I would like to ask the member for Transcona, how would an NDP government have better planned a safe return to school this fall?
Well, the honourable member for Transcona.
I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I always think it's time to talk as soon as the question is done. But I will say we would have instituted immediately all of the Manitoba Health public health regulations in our schools. We would immediately have instituted a cap class size at 15. We would have ensured that we had enough human resources so that we can properly space our classroom, because it actually takes time to make sure that these things happen. We would make sure that all of the teaching supplies that are needed to make the teaching and learning process smooth in classrooms would have been there for teachers. They would have known right away that the government would have had funds available and would have made.
The honourable member's time is up. The honourable member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Just heard the member talk about how they would have made sure they would have done all these things. But for 17 years, there was poor planning in Manitoba's public school systems. We had the second highest dropout rate in the country. We had the lowest scores among all the provinces in Canada. I'm just wondering how the member opposite can say some of these things, knowing that his party actually left very significant holes. And when you compare across our country, begs a lot of answers and certainly contributed significantly to changing government.
The honourable member's time is up.
2016.
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member from Rossmere for his question. I understand too that the member from Rossmere was a Transcona Collegiate grad, if I'm not mistaken, as I am a TCI grad, and I think we're both of us are up on the wall there at TCI, right in front of the bench, the coaster bench. But to get back to his serious question, you know what, all we're focused on right now is what's in front of us and what's going to be there in the future. This pandemic has placed many challenges in front of us, and if anything is needed, is we need a government that is supporting teachers in public education and then putting the necessary resources in place so that we can move forward.
The honourable member's time is up. The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Transcona for bringing forward this resolution. I was wondering if in the creation of this resolution, there was any part of it that was directly aimed for post-secondary students and post-secondary institutions.
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member from Tyndall Park for the question. You know what? We know that the current government has also instituted cuts in post-secondary, and we're starting to see some of the effects of that. Many of us members here in the legislature, as a matter of fact, have students right now that are currently enrolled in our universities and colleges, and we're feeling the effects of those cuts because not only increased tuition, but also a lack of training space that has now become made available. We had the member from Radisson describe how he has his daughter dropping all those IVs and stuff from the kitchen van. But I will say that
the honourable member's time is up. The honourable member for Lagimodiere.
Can the member from Transcona expand on why an independent review of Winnipeg 1 School Division was ordered by the Minister of Education, while his fellow member, the MLA for Fort Garry, was board chair?
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member for, is it Lagimodiere, Mr. Deputy Speaker?
Lagimodiere, yes.
Lagimodiere. Again, you know what we're focused on here is the pandemic and how it's impacted on our classrooms and how it's impacted public education in the province. And what we've seen a lack of support from this government during this pandemic in the classroom. And we have to make sure that as members of this House that we put forth private members' resolutions such as this that support our teachers, support our students, and support our families, because they're rightly concerned about what's going on in the classroom, and they're kind of concerned about the inconsistency.
The honourable member's time is up.
Of what's been happening.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I wanted to ask the member for Transcona to speak to some of the issues going on that I'm hearing about in my constituency. Right now, there's a teacher who's at a school with 33 staff out, 33 teachers out sick, and the ability to only get substitutes in half the classrooms. And I'm hearing multiple stories like that. That's just the most recent. So how would this private member's resolution speak to those very real concerns happening right now?
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member for Wolseley for that question. As you know, teaching is a human resource intensive occupation. And in order to make sure that we reach every kid and every child and every family, that we have to make sure that we have enough human resources in place to ensure that those kind of things don't happen. We knew that through the pandemic that staffing was going to be greatly impacted. I think we could have done this government could have done a better job on planning for that, and knowing that it is a human resource intensive piece, that we could have had some more teachers.
The honourable member's time is up.
Pieces made part of.
The honourable member's time is up. The honourable member for Lagimodiere, do you have another question?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do ask the question. I know the member from Transcona has talked about investing in education. I would like to ask him why, under 17 years of NDP government, the NDP government did not build adequate number of schools across the province to address the growing communities in our many communities across this province.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the member from Lagimodiere for his question. Again, I've said this earlier, is that what we're focused on what the effect that the pandemic is having on education right now. We're focused on right now what's going on in our classrooms. We're focused on how, as the pandemic progresses, we're going to have more and more challenges. I mean, this government talks about ready, safe, grow. They need to ask themselves, what are they doing to make our classrooms safe so that we can keep some of our economy going? And I think that's a more important question than the one that looks to the past. Right? We're looking to the future. We're looking to see how
the honourable member's time is up.
Support our schools.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. One final question for the member from Transcona. Where should this government invest the $85 million of federal funding for schools to keep Manitobans safe?
The honourable member for Transcona.
I want to thank the member from Wolseley for the question. As a principal and as teachers, just like many members that are here in the legislature, our number one job is to keep our kids safe, right? So what we would do immediately is ensure that we have a proper adult to student ratio so that we can maintain the physically distanced pieces that have been put forth by Manitoba Health and Dr. Roussin. That would be the number one thing we would do, and we would ensure that those pieces are consistently applied throughout the province. That's what's missing. It's a consistent application of Manitoba.
The honourable member's time is up
in our schools, and that has to happen.
Time for question period. Time for question period has expired. Debate is open. Any speakers? The honourable member for Lac de Bonnie.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but I believe that the member for Steinbach is speaking first.
The honourable member for the honourable minister for education.
Oh, thank you very much, and I thank my. That's a rousing applause for the members in the chamber. I thank my colleague from Lac de Bonnie for allowing me to speak in advance. Although I do look forward to his words of wisdom on this resolution. To the member for Transcona, who knows that I have an appreciation for him personally and professionally, I think we respect each other as colleagues here in the legislature. I believe he brought forward the resolution with all the best intentions, although it might be in its form and substance misguided, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do think that he does have the best interests of those working in the education system at heart, and he did speak, and will agree on this point, about the challenges that teachers and EAs and bus drivers and janitors and all those who are working in the school system are going through at this time. And of course, that's reflective of society as a whole. Everyone is going through difficult times, regardless of what occupation, field, or life circumstance you're in, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is a universal condition that everyone is going through. But in particular, when it comes to the schools, there's no doubt that teachers and others are having a lot of challenges when it comes to their job, because they're being asked to do a lot more, like many others are in society, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I would say that they are doing an exceptional job. They are taking on this task of keeping their students safe at the same time that they're educating them with great vigor and with great responsibility. And we are all grateful. I think all members of the legislature are grateful, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And all of us extend our thanks and our gratitude to them. Dr. Roussin has already indicated several times, including as late as last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that schools are not a significant source of transmission at this point of COVID-19, of the virus. And that truly is a credit to all of those who are working in the system, but also to those who plan. And where I would take particular exception with my friend from Transcona is that he continues, along with members of his caucus, to degenerate and to speak negatively about the planning that happened from public health and others in the school system during the summer when it was leading up to the reopening of schools. Certainly Dr. Roussin and public health in general, and I know there's a large team, although Dr. Roussin is very much the face of that team these days, work very closely with our department, with officials in the school system more generally, to develop a plan that was not only safe but truly designed to keep schools open, because we heard from parents through Engage Manitoba and from teachers and educators as well that they wanted to be back in the classroom, that they wanted students to be back in the classroom. And I continue to hear from students who are glad that they're back in class, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So the planning that went on was truly intended to ensure we knew that there would be cases that would come into the school, because there are cases in community, and students are, of course, living in the community. Some are working within the community, depending on what their age is. So we knew that there would be cases that would come into the schools, but all the work was done to how do we ensure that safety was there and schools remained open. So the cohorting that was happening from grade K to 8 was about ensuring that we wouldn't have to close down an entire school. And we saw that in many places in Alberta and other jurisdictions where they didn't have cohorting, at least initially, that entire schools were affected when there was a relatively minimal number of cases in the schools. At the high school level, where we know that transmission of the virus from other jurisdictions is more risky, that there's a higher level of transmission, we had to ensure that there was that 2-meter distancing. Of course, it was encouraged throughout the system, but the cohorting was there for K to 8. Now that is following public health advice. That is the advice that our government received from public health. Dr. Roussin and public health agreed to the plan. They were there when it was announced. The member opposite, the member for Transcona, knows that planning happened, yet he continues to speak negatively of the work of public health. And I think that that's a big disservice, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this particular time. I think that those who in public health are leading us and giving us advice, we need to be supportive of that work, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And so I would ask him to be cautious in his words and to ensure that he is looking at the great work that they've done. Now, leading up, of course, to the pandemic, our government has provided record level of supports for the K-12 education system. That is ignored by the member opposite. He ignores the 20 new schools that we're committed to, but not only committed to, a number of them have already opened. Many of them are under construction, and others are going to be coming online, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And there was a question about why the NDP didn't invest properly in schools. So on the one hand, they talk about the lack of space, and yet on the other hand, they are very much the reason that there is a lack of space within our schools. But we're addressing that. Of course, it's not as simple as adding water and stirring when it comes to building classroom space. There's a lot of time and design that happens. But our government got to work on that immediately in terms of taking office in 2016 and getting those schools built, and many of them have already now opened. And so that is a better situation than would have been had the NDP been re-elected in 2016 or in the most recent provincial election. When it comes to class sizes, the class size initiative, of course, that money still remains in place. What we have said, of course, to school divisions, as the money for the initiative remains in place, you can determine how you'd best like to use that money to better the educational experience for your students. Now, on the one hand, members opposite will say we need to give more discretion to school divisions to allocate and use money, but then on the other hand, they say, well, no, you should force them to use this pot of money in a certain way, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So they are contradicting themselves in what it is that they want us to do when it comes to working with school divisions, giving school divisions the opportunity to use that money to keep class sizes low. And I understand that there's been no change in the class sizes since 2016, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but giving them the ability to use that money is important in the way that they feel is best, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When it comes to funding for the COVID-19 response in schools, we've been very clear from the beginning that there was going to be funds available for the additional costs in dealing with the pandemic in schools, and in fact there is, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The member for Transcona ignores that fact. We asked school divisions to accumulate the savings that they had when it came to the disruption of schools in the spring. That amounted to about $48 million. We added $52 million on top of that. School divisions have been accessing that funding. In September, $15.5 million was spent on such things as PPE, technology, transportation, and millions of dollars, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has been spent on hiring teachers and other staff in the school. So the member for Transcona simply is not being accurate and not being forthcoming with the facts when it comes to there's been significant investment in new personnel in the school system. When it comes to the federal funding that was announced, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is of course important to remember, because members opposite continue to put the wrong information on the record, that half of that funding is only going to come to Manitoba, we're told, next year from the federal government. It hasn't even been provided to Manitoba. In terms of the balance, we've already indicated we're going to be using a good portion of that money to hire education officials to help with remote learning. We understand that there are many more students, including those who are now choosing to homeschool, who might not naturally be homeschoolers, who might not otherwise have homeschooled but for the pandemic, and they need additional support, and that money is going to be used to provide that support to the system. We also know that as students go home, whether because of cohorting or immune-compromised education, that they need that support, and their teachers need that support for additional remote learning. So we've indicated that that funding is being used for that particular purpose. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, while the member opposite, the member for Transcona, may have been well-intentioned in this resolution, it is simply not true in terms of the facts that he is trying to state, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There's been more funding invested in the K-12 system than ever was under the NDP. There's more capital funding when it comes to the schools that have been built and are going to continue to be built. There have been $100 million invested on the COVID-19 response. Millions of those dollars have already been spent, and they'll be continued to be spent and fully expended. The federal money, such as has flowed already, has been allocated partially to getting the new resources for remote learning, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and there's been significant planning that has been happening since early in the summer, together with public health, our health experts who we rely on, who the member for Transcona is not only disparaging, but now asking us to ignore, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So he's wrong on many accounts. Even though I like him personally, doesn't mean he's right.
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I'm very happy to get the opportunity to speak to what I think is a very important resolution, and I thank my colleague and the member for Transcona for his very hard work on this resolution. I want to say that I have had almost daily, possibly it's been daily, but I don't want to make an error on the record, but almost daily contact with teachers, EAs, parents of school-aged children, administrators, board members from various school boards around the city over the past few months, dating back till probably mid-July, when people were very concerned about what was the government doing to get ready. And I didn't have an answer for them because there was no information being released from the government at that time. Excuse me, nothing to show us, nothing to assure the school community that the many months of low cases of COVID, many months of self-isolation had been used as an opportunity to prepare and to fund schools for what was required. Some of the more recent contacts I've had in the last couple of days include, as I mentioned a little earlier, a teacher in a high school where 33 teachers are self-isolating this week awaiting for test results, and less than half of those were able to find substitutes for their classrooms. Yesterday, a recently retired principal reached out to share with me her grave concerns about the level of burnout that teachers are experiencing. And, until recently, teachers were not told to self-isolate if a student in their classroom tested positive. In fact, some teachers only learned from students themselves that they were ill because they weren't considered close contacts and were not notified in any formal way. One teacher who is at home awaiting test results after developing a fever on the weekend only found out after the fact that she also had a student at home who is ill and recovering from COVID-19. The Pallister government set schools up to fail going into this pandemic. Year after year of cuts to education did leave school divisions grossly under-resourced, and particularly in the last few years when terrible caps were set, where schools were undermined through the funding process. We do know that small class sizes are conducive both to better learning and reduced spread of COVID-19. And I won't pretend people know that I was a school trustee. That was a challenge to meet some of those goals around reduced reduced classroom sizes for school divisions. But it was an ongoing process, and it made for better education. It made for better educated students. And just as that school division where I was involved was meeting that cap and finally able to have that in place for students across the board, this government was elected and just got rid of something very important that schools had been working on for some time. If the government had invested in keeping class sizes small, our schools would have been much better able to provide 2 meters separation for all students, teachers, and staff. And the Pallister government has simply outright ignored these calls from teachers, students, support staff, parents, and other community groups to ensure that class sizes remain small. I guess I understand at a high up level that there's a big desire in this government not to spend money at any cost. But I can't imagine that other members in this House are not receiving the same calls, the same emails, the same desperate cries to be heard from teachers and education assistants and parents. And I honestly don't know how the members in this House and on the other side of the House can look those people in the eye, can listen to their pleas, and not push the education minister and the premier to invest adequately in education at this time. We know that the Pallister government received over $85 million from the federal government to invest in schools, and that none of that has been spent. And the gaming in this House over the last week, the unwillingness to just tell us the plan it's reprehensible. We know that out of the $100 million of provincial money, only $17 million has been spent for cleaning, transportation, technology, staffing, and PPE. This government is just simply more preoccupied with the bottom line than the teachers that are stressed out on the brink of burnout, the parents that are worried about their children's well-being. They've simply refused calls to hire more teachers, support staff, and educational assistants. And we all know about the 8,000 educational staff who were laid off during the pandemic, when all kinds of creative ways they could have been put to work to support students learning at home last spring. That was such a disappointment and such a lost opportunity. We know that this premier has interfered in ongoing negotiations at school divisions, which precipitated a strike affecting transportation for many students and family right at the height of the pandemic and the return to school. We also know that teachers, educational assistants, and staff in schools are doing the best they can right now, but they can't do this alone. This government would like to twist these comments on the problems in education And I'm probably going to hear that, at some point that I'm saying that there's something wrong in schools or wrong with teachers. No, these people are heroes, and they are doing everything they can with so little support. We urge the provincial government to immediately invest in provincial public schools, to hire more teachers, hire more educational assistants, acquire new spaces for teaching and programming, provide more mental health supports for students and educators, invest in remote learning supports as needed, and use the money provided by the federal government to ensure that all Manitoba students receive the education they deserve. If the return to school wasn't stressful enough, the PC government is making schools just jump through hoops to apply for the money they need to keep schools safe. And all I can think about is how much of the administrative costs that this government, the administrative funding that this government has cut from schools. Year after year, they've put caps on administration costs at schools, even when school divisions were ahead of the game and capped their administrative costs in anticipation of cuts. They were just cut further. And now, all this government's doing is creating administrative work, creating more and more hoops for administrators to jump through while it's like cutting the legs out from under them. And it's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game to underfund the COVID-19 response and refuse to commit to using those federal funds and to make people jump through all kinds of administrative hoops in order to access those funds. The Premier has no evidence to support his decision. This so-called review of small class sizes didn't allow any time to measure. The funding freeze means more crowded classrooms, which we know had devastating consequences for the quality of education. And we know that the Pallister government is only getting started. Right in the height of a pandemic, they're hiding the results of a public education review, and have been sitting on a report for 6 months, 7 months, hiding the results while writing bills to change education permanently in this province, devastating potentially education for many years and decades to come. We believe in putting the educational needs and health and safety of our children first, ahead of budget cuts. Education should be the most important thing we do, next to healthcare and next to climate change. Those are the three things that will help us survive as a community, as a province, and as human beings moving forward. Sorry, as I just lost my train of thought there. We will continue to fight the Pallister government's austerity agenda by calling them out on their cuts to education and lack of investments in services and supports that improve children's outcomes, such as nutrition programs, reduced class sizes, hiring more EAs, and making schools safe during COVID-19. We call on the government to step up and do the right thing. And please, please consider this PMR, pass supporting this PMR. I urge the members on the other side of the House, stand up for your community, stand up for your families, and don't just toe the party line this time around, because lives depend on it.
The honourable member's time is up. The honourable member for Lac-de-Bonnie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's an absolute privilege and an honor to of course, represent the constituents of Lac-de-Bonnie here in this great building on Broadway in Winnipeg here. It gives me great pleasure to be able to put a few words on the record to basically correct the record from some of what the member from Wolseley has just decided to put on. And again, I remind her, in Hansford under her name. And of course, the member from Transcona who brought forward this resolution, I gave him a couple opportunities, Mr. Acting Deputy Speaker, or Mr. Deputy Speaker. I gave him a couple opportunities and to basically say that no really, it wasn't him who fully wrote that resolution. He said he put an extensive amount of work into it. And then the member from Wolseley even solidified that, and by saying how greatly appreciative she was of him for putting all that hard work into this resolution. Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this resolution is so full of holes, we could be making a sandwich out of it with some cheese, with some salami or something going on. Because this resolution absolutely, as the education minister had stood up and put on many, many facts to basically battle this. And again, the member from Transcona, I know that we have many friends in the mutual friends in the education world, and I know that he was a principal of a K-5 school, and so when I first received this resolution and started looking at it last week, and really started to think about, okay, so what am I going to say? And I mean, the majority of my speech, I really do want to take the time to commend all the hard work of all of our teachers, not only teachers, but school staff, our custodians, our bus drivers, our administration, our senior administration. As a teacher myself, and as the member from Transcona, being a former teacher, a retired teacher, and a principal, again, of that K-5 school, you know what? I listened to him talk passionately on Tuesday on the United Church piece of legislation that the member from Riding Mountain brought forward. And I had a few things sort of ready to go for today's speech. And then the member from Transcona mentioned that he is of Italian immigrant descent, and they moved here into to Manitoba, and then it reminded me, as many people know, I spent the majority of my education career teaching at a 6 to 12 school of over 700 kids. Guidance counseling, worked mainly in student services, but also taught at the high school level, middle school level. But during my time of student teaching, going through university, I spent some time, of course, teaching at the kindergarten level, which was absolutely fantastic. And you know what? One of the really important, memorable books that a lot of kindergarten students loved, and I know that the member from Transcona would appreciate this, was a book which was set up in a small Tuscan village called San Maniato in Italy, actually. And so that book, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is actually titled Pinocchio. And so with this resolution, and because the member from Transcona put so much effort into this resolution, I'm almost thinking that instead of being the MLA for Transcona, the member from Transcona should maybe be the member from that small Tuscan village where the book Pinocchio had come out, because again, this resolution has so many holes in it. I would like to echo some of the words that our education minister put on the record. I have to commend him. And I know deep down that the member from Transcona, I don't believe that he put that much effort into this resolution. I actually thought that he probably was given some of this. But I'm going to take his word for it, that he put in that much work into this, because I don't believe he believes in a lot of the things that were put in this resolution. I know from experience, and so does he, and so does some of our trustees, and so does a lot of our caucus members on the PC government team that actually spent, I'm thinking we're about probably close to about 100 years of collective experience within the education world on the PC government team. And, I know how much effort and how much work not only the education minister, but also Dr. Roussin had put in to making sure that we had the right plans to make sure that our kids and our staff, and again, not just teachers, not just EAs, but definitely they're on the front lines, but our bus drivers, our cleaning staff. Think of how overworked our cleaning staff is now of making sure that everything is COVID friendly, COVID free. And for them to put this resolution forward today is a bit of a slap in the face to those people that had to put in that much time and effort into the planning for this. There's no playbook. There was no, this is how you should do it. Those superintendents, senior administration, boards, administration, principals, all the way down, student services, they've put in countless hours. My youngest son is in grade 12 in his final year of high school. He is going every second day. His teachers are going above and beyond to make sure that he is getting the equivalent of an education as if he was in school each and every day. Matter of fact, I think he's receiving more homework, but he is busting it to make sure that he gets all the knowledge possible that he can get throughout his grade 12 year. And I have to commend the teachers and the communication. And the member from Lever-Andre earlier today mentioned about the technology and how we have to learn to live within this new world. I can't commend the staff and also the parents for having to work on and in such a trying time. It is difficult, but you know what? Much like our police and firefighters and teachers and doctors and nurses and absolutely everybody, they went to school for these reasons. They are stepping up and they are exceeding their potential. They are knocking it out of the park as far as how they are handling this. Is it stressful? Absolutely, it's stressful. We are absolutely all stressed. All of us, each and every one of us throughout this whole province of ours, and not only province, but Canada, North America, and the world. This is something we've never seen before, or that I've seen before. Maybe some of our members are old enough to have seen some other things, but and I'm talking on both sides of the house. But for myself, this is the first go around on something this major, this pandemic. I do want to highlight a few of the funding that have gone out to schools, and I want to echo some of the things that the education minister had put out to correct the record from the member from Transcona and the member from Wolseley. We're talking since 2016, we've increased funding to schools by over $30 million. That is not a drop in the bucket. The member from Wolseley and the member from Transcona, they often talk about cuts. Well, if it's an increase, it is not a cut, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I appreciate the amount of time that I'm getting to put on the record here. I see that I've got just under a minute left, and there's so many more things that I want to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I am going to talk about the fact that these people on the other side of the house, they want to see certain things happening. Well, I have to remind them, the premiers reminded them, the education ministers reminded them that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. The money is going to be there. The federal government is going to be sending in the other half, as the education minister mentioned, not until next year. So there is money flowing. There is decisions. There's money flowing so that the administration and senior admin can make those decisions that they need for their sites within their school divisions. I more than appreciate the time.
The honourable member's time is up.
Morning.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Yeah, there are lots of problems with this motion, and I think if you actually listen to each side, you quickly understand exactly what the problem is. The fact is, this pandemic has showed lots of problems, and one of them is that in Winnipeg School Division, the last time ventilation systems were installed is at about 1976. They last for 30 years, so they're 15 years past their due date. So neither the PCs nor the NDP have put any investments into Manitoba schools. These are long overdue investments, and they never happened. The fact is that both under the NDP and the PCs, the provincial contribution has shrunk. I actually have kids in Winnipeg School Division. I have skin in the game. It's my kids who've had to put up with this nonsense. The math curriculum was a disaster under the NDP. And the fact is that there were cuts to special needs children in 2015 under the last NDP government. So please spare me the sanctimony and the hypocrisy. Because if you want to know what it's like to ask for help from a government that doesn't care about education, I have experience doing it from both the NDP and the PCs. I have to try to, at a point, this government did such a bad job of communicating its pandemic preparedness that I was supposed to sell chocolate bars so they could have hand washing stations and remote learning in my kids' school. It's unbelievable. They did nothing. There was no commitment to the end of August to spend any new money on schools. Not a dime of new money. And there's still a huge gap where they've said, well, we're going to spend $48 million. To date, we spent 15. The Minister of Education is not being accurate when he says that the federal government won't send money till next year. The only reason that will happen is because this government isn't spending the money now. There was a multi-million-dollar slush fund that used to be spent on NDP schools. This government canceled a whole ton of projects in places like Kelvin High School, downtown, all sorts of projects where people had raised money, and the PC government canceled it and then invested in schools in places like Steinbach and Morton Winkler. And I'll just add one other thing is when we talk about this $85 million that's supposed to be going to federal funding, the Premier keeps on saying, well, it's really not that much of a deal. It's only a tiny percentage. He's trying to pretend that $85 million is not a lot of money when we're talking about teachers burning out. I'm getting calls from people who are desperate. The Manitoba Teacher Society just said that the teacher workload is unsustainable and the government must ask now. And I'm just going to say one other thing, is that the NDP could have mentioned the fact that this Minister of Education has met with Ted Cruz, has met with Betsy DeVos, that he has foreseen a future where less than half of the students are going to be educated in public schools, and they've been absolutely silent about it. Instead, the NDP critic shrugged. He doesn't care about who the Minister of Education meets with. We do, and we stood up for Safe September as well when the NDP didn't. So please spare me the sanctimony, spare me the hypocrisy. We support investment in schools, but the fact is the PC and the NDP have both been wrong in failing to invest, not just for years, but for decades. Thank you.
Oh, the honourable member for Concordia.
Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Okay, the honourable member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I noticed that the speaking order was a little bit mixed up, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to this. I have a number of things in common with the member who brought this forward. We are both TCI grads, and he mentioned that we both appear on the wall at Transcona Collegiate. That is true, but I'm fairly certain that we are not in the same frame. Sometimes I wonder if I look older than I am, but I was, I think, 1996. So, and I see colleagues nodding that I look older, but that's not the subject. I do want to.
When this matter is before the House, the honourable member for Rossmere will have 9 minutes remaining. The hour being 12 p.m. The House is recessed and stands recessed to 1:30 p.m.